So today we have Qasif with us, the co-founder and CEO of Finja. Let's hear about their story. So Qasif, welcome on the show, and good to have you here. So how about you take an initial few minutes and give a brief intro about you?
Well, I worked in banks most of my life, more years than I'd like to admit.
Okay.
Close to 18. And I've always been a digital banking head, mostly. I was one in Singapore, ABN AMRO, then Standard Chartered, and then MCB. I've also worked in Africa and UAE, and I've been building mobile solutions, internet banking, all of these things since the late 90s. First time built a mobile transaction in the year 2001 in Singapore.
Okay.
So it's phenomenal for me to be able to see the world come round, because when we were bankers, we were called alternate banking. And when the entire banking conversation would finish and then they'll ask us to come on, so we were like a sideshow. But today in the post-pandemic world, you cannot run a meeting about financial services without the digital or the fintech guys being there. So, we have a seat at the head of the table.
You seem to be sounding like you were the blockchain and of that time.
Well,
we were sitting on the side today and saying that we could be the real deal, actually.
Absolutely yes. I mean, I remember having fights with my banking colleagues when we would put the first ATMs in Pakistan, and people like, well, for this money we can go out and hire 20 tellers. Why should we put an ATM? So similar conversations you have today with blockchain.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, what's your work experience within Pakistan? Aapne bataya ki you have been around the globe for many different banks and financial institutions.
Yeah. So well, I was Mia Mansha's digital head, MCB's digital head for 6 years till 2014, and the dream was that we'll change the banking industry from this platform. And worked very, very hard. Actually, the truth is I've never worked harder than for those 6 years. But what I realized in the process is that, the more successful a bank is, the more money a bank makes, and MCB is more profitable than any other bank, profit is a ratio play, the lesser likely it is to change and transform. Because always remember that innovation is something where the premium is held by the industry, not by the innovator. And the Seth understands that better than anyone else, right? So I could change the bank from the inside, but the minute I wanted to go and do things which would transform the industry, they weren't very forthcoming, and that's got me to come out of the bank, realizing that entrepreneurship is not going to save the banking industry or change anything. I also realized that a best use of my life is not to make the richest man in Pakistan more rich. Has to be something bigger than that.
Okay. Yeah. So, talking about digital payments, and you said you were involved since 2001 in that. So, I was doing something probably after my MS from LAMS or something. Back in 2007 or 8, I remember I met with Fahad Bangish, who was doing Amana at that time.
Yeah.
And it didn't go anywhere because of many regulatory issues and whatnot. So tell us more about the landscape today. I mean, you started Finja, and we'll come to...
Look, I mean, Amana and Fahad were like 20 years ahead of their time, right?
Yeah.
And, entrepreneurship, a lot of times tragedy happens because you're way ahead of your time. So I think the word is called traction, and you have to come in at the right time. And I empathize with Amana and some other players before that as well. But today we live in a very different world. Today we are living in a post-pandemic world, and I have to tell you this, that the pandemic has been the ultimate black swan.
Yeah.
It has given digital payments and fintechs and startups a speed pass to the likes of
10 years pass at least.
A 10-year speed pass.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you why this has happened. It's happened because the way businesses and individuals, how they approach life is completely changed now. So for example, individuals don't want to go out and handle cash or do payments in a physical play anymore. And if they are, they're just simply termed as reckless or irresponsible because they bring that risk to their families. And businesses have realized very quickly overnight in most places like Pakistan that they cannot operate if they don't digitize their payments. If you can't disperse your salaries and your payments to your vendors, suppliers and partners digitally, if you can't receive your collections digitally, you're as good as dead. Now, so this is where the realities have shifted, but at the same time, the incumbent banks are not structured to now go out and quickly innovate and produce to fill this gap. And the question would be why? And the answer is that banks are vertically integrated organizations which are pushing products and services to their users. And then they deal in store value of money. So they are super conservative, and then the primary play for banks is to protect their regulatory license. So the folks in the bank are committed to protect the regulatory license. They can't innovate to save their lives. And the businesses and the individuals are now screaming for digital payments. So you don't have to sell digital payments anymore. And right in the middle of that void is where the fintechs and the startups are coming in. They are basically the bridge between the consumers and the businesses and the banks to fill that void. So what I like to say, and I've been saying this for many, many years now, which is this, and which is true now, which is this, that whatever the apps have done to smartphones is exactly what the fintechs and banks are doing, fintechs would do to the banks. And what is it that the apps have done to the smartphones? It's the apps that have made the smartphone the most pervasive device in the history of mankind. Because the burden of innovation moved from the platforms
to the developers,
guys, to the developers. Similarly, the burden of innovation will move from the banks to the more nimble fintechs and startups.
I'll come to that because there are a lot of questions around it, but we didn't ask you about the product, the Finja, your startup, what it is, what really the product is, and which spaces are you in?
Look, I mean, today, and I say this with a lot of pride, that Finja is the largest digital lending platform that this country has. We are the 5th largest country in the world, but we've done very little lending. And in that little lending that we've done, Finja is the largest digital lending platform. What we do is that, among other things, we lend to small Karyana stores, mom and pop stores, and everybody else in the FMCG supply chain. And what's brilliant about our business model is that we don't give out cash, but we create credit lines that these stores can use now to buy supplies upstream. And as a consequence, their sales go up 30 to 40%. So this is clean, non-collateralized lending that these small stores get by not filling out forms or never leaving their store. And these credit that we create for them through our AI and machine learning algorithms, they can use this credit to buy from the distributors as those distributors bring goods to these stores. Now the reality is that these small stores don't always have cash. So when the distributors bring these goods, the stores can't buy. And then that increases the cost of the entire operation. But when we give them credit, they can buy in bulk. And they buy more, so they have more SKUs, the depth of the SKUs increase, their stores fill up with goods, footfall increases, and they make 30 to 40% more money. So these are small loans of 40, 50,000 rupees, anywhere between 50 to 30 days. And when the store sells the goods and makes the profit, from that profit they return us our fee. So everybody is winning. That's the brilliance of the Finja business model, right? The small store is winning. The customers are winning because these stores are hyper local. Nobody wants to go to Al Fatah and Agha's anymore. They want to go to these smaller stores, but they'll only go to smaller stores if they have more goods. The distributor is winning because his cost of business is going down. He doesn't have to lock his own capital. Finja is winning, and the Finja's partner banks, which have now come in because our portfolios have created vintage, are winning. So the brilliance of our business model is that we don't compete with anybody, but at the same time, all stakeholders that come in contact with the business model win, and we only win as a consequence.
Okay. You said a lot about lending, and in Pakistan, uncollateralized lending is kind of a dream that Pied Piper's dream. So is it really happening? How's the state bank?
Yeah, I mean,
or are you Or who are your underwriters or money providers? Are there banks, or you are doing it with your VC funding, or how it's happening?
Look, today we do millions of dollars of lending every month.
Okay.
Millions of dollars of lending every month, and we are growing at a rate of 30 to 40%. When we started out, we were doing most of this lending, all of this lending through the equity that we raised.
Okay.
Right, and we are a funded company, and we've raised well over $10 million. So we use that equity to build the vintages of the portfolios that we have. Since these are small term loans, so today I've got my store owners in their 10th, 12th, 15th, 18th cycle of taking a credit line, buying the stuff, repaying it. And this is called portfolios with vintage.
Right.
Because we could go out and create these vintages in these portfolios that nobody before us could do. Now we've got banks coming in and saying that why don't you use our capital to go out and lend, and as a consequence, whatever money we make can be split, which is phenomenal because now multiple banks are coming in, giving us their credit books, and we are partly using their book, partly using our books. This type of approach is called a marketplace lender or a hybrid lender or an asset-light lender. Now, in a market like Pakistan where such little lending has happened, it's important that fintechs like us become enablers of the banks. The demand for capital is almost unlimited. And if I were to try and do that alone from a Finja vertical would be a very different approach than to take all the banks along. But the banks are banks. They would never come and partner with you till the time you show to them that there is actually no risk. And we've been blessed to be able to do that, right? So, so we have licenses now, which are lower than the banks from both regulators. We had capital, and we were the first ones to package that capital, use technology, and very efficiently give those small amounts to these stores and then bring them back. And we could do all of this without any dependency on the banks because we had the licenses, right? So today we can score anyone, we can disperse to anyone, we can onboard anyone, we can recollect and do the whole play. We became that red dot that started to get away from the banks, and now, we've got banks as our partners, which is phenomenal because that's what we want to do. We don't want to compete with banks.
So your interaction with bank, because we are in a digital application and it's all digital stuff, is it still through paper and pencil, or you are well integrated into their systems? Because I also remember going and talking to banks sometimes back, and I said I want to do Paytm in a different way, and they told me there is only one company in Pakistan that has all the interfaces, you need to talk to them, etc., etc. And I said, why can't you kind of expose your APIs to me? I said, no, we cannot, X, Y, Z. So tell us how far the bank has come in terms of technology. That's question one. And before I forget, I'll be adding others.
Please.
And I was listening to the Tamir Bank CEO, and he's saying Pakistan is one of the most ferocious cash economies you can ever see.
Yeah.
So part of it is we do not want to pay taxes, or we are averse to undocumented economy. So once you're going through your kind of platform, things are getting documented. So how it's impacting or not impacting your overall traction? So these two questions.
Yeah. Look, phenomenal questions. The first one is that, look, these are election years, right? Last 2 years. The regulators and the policymakers have to make sure that there is enough capital and credit that goes to these small businesses. And the banks in this country historically have never lent to these small businesses. Right, so the state bank keeps coming out with these programs, and some of them are more effective than the other, but these are subsidy programs.
Right.
So the real way to spur real digital lending to MSMEs, which is 90% of any economy, and Pakistan is not any different, would require that bridge between the fintechs and the banks. Right now, these are early days, so in the early days, the partnerships will happen between the licensed fintechs and the banks. It's like nobody ever gets fired for giving work to IBM,
Right.
So nobody ever gets fired by going out and creating partnerships with fintechs that are regulated by the same regulator as the banks.
Right.
So State Bank right now and SCCP, run by some phenomenal folks right now, are going out and creating these marriages between banks and fintechs for this type of lending to happen. To answer your question, all banks now are at different levels of exposing their APIs. Some have full set of APIs, some are going to do it in the next few weeks, and all of them at one level or another want to create real integrated partnerships with fintechs where they could go out and grow, and the regulators want that more than anything else. So the atmosphere in Pakistan today for fintech and bank collaborations, at least for the regulated, fintechs, is very different than it was like a year ago.
So there are new startups which are springing in, like Abhi Finance and many others who are also into the lending sphere. So how easy or difficult it is right now?
Look, I mean, the first step is a fintech would have to go out and then create portfolios where the banks can see that bad debt is negligible, and they're smelling of flowers, those portfolios, right? The second is the credibility of that fintech, and part of that, because these are early days, come from these licenses. But within the next few months, even if you don't have licenses and you have portfolios whose vintages have arrived, you would be able to find banks that would partner with you. Today, the fintechs that have licenses have a responsibility that they operate like platforms, and they come in and partner with fintechs and startups that don't have licenses.
So how difficult it is to get all these licenses and startups? Has it become easier over time? I mean, or still it's an uphill task?
Look, I mean, licenses is a hard play because, you have paid up capital requirements that go in, and then, once you get those licenses, it's like, I like to say that getting licenses is like, aapne vardi pehen liye. So you are no more a pirate, in Steve Jobs' words. Now you are a naval ship,
right?
And there are protocols that you have to follow, right? And there is a weight of this vardi that you wear, right? You become a real idara, but the real idara does not have the moves of a jet ski there, right? So it takes time. It takes a year to 18 months to get these licenses. You end up blocking your money, in paid up capital, and then. Yes, I mean your nimbleness is affected.
But I was also going through this digital bank policy, and the kind of, I thought that digital bank is eventually an idea if it comes to Pakistan, but the kind of requirements they have, it feels that only companies which have prior financial products or portfolio or has strong banking presence already can do that. So someone like me who wants to maybe do a digital bank, who's maybe very technology savvy, can bring in even the capital. The kind of prereqs are just such that probably I cannot do that. What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, the thing is that the game is rigged for the existing banks to somehow take advantage of
tenders are made to be
digital
given.
Banks, right?
I mean, that's
but the thing is that if you ask yourselves this question, that if you're a bank, why do you need a digital bank license? Right? And the answer is that it's a great story to give to your board, because now you're telling your board, when we get this license, then everything is going to be okay. So
it's
what you do is
2030
you end up buying these 3 years or 5 years, right? And at the end of those 3 or 5 years, you have this nice little digital bank license that you won't know what to do with. So if you ask me, it's just a time-buying tactic for some of these large banks, that everything's going to be okay when we have these digital banks. The other thing is that State Bank would want blue chip players across the globe with serious credentials to come into Pakistan at the back of buying those digital banking licenses, right? That's the third play. But in the process, people who are being left out are the crazy ones that change the world.
Yeah.
Right? So my advice would be to people who would be listening to this is that, look, don't go out and start trying to do B2C play on day one. Go out and create a B2B play where you can come on top of an existing fintech with licenses or on top of an existing bank, just like the app did for the smartphone, and then win on top of that bank as play one. Then go out and consider getting lower licenses like the NBFC or the EMI or a PSP or whatever, and then eventually make your way to a digital bank.
So should we start thinking of Finja not just a lending platform but also platform as a service on which other people can build? Are you going in that direction?
Absolutely. I mean, we've got 3 different licenses. Nobody has those 3 licenses actually.
And which are these?
Well, one license that we have is EMI, which is electronic money issuer, which allows us to take deposit like a bank, own a consumer-facing brand, do our own know your customer and any money laundering
KYC,
and all of that. The only difference between us and a bank is that the money that we raise, we can't go out and lend that back. But we can invest it in T-bills like the other banks, but we can't lend it back, right? For that, we have circumvented the process and gotten another license under the SCCP, which is called the Non-Banking Finance Corporation, NBFC, which allows us, or NBFI, which allows us to now lend.
Okay.
The third license that we have is again under the SCCP, which allows us to crowdfund. So we can actually take investments from institutions and individuals and invest them directly in our lending portfolios. So that we are not only dependent in lending through our equity or through our bank partnerships, we can actually...
So is crowdfunding is kind of somewhere regulated over here?
Absolutely.
Like in US, you have to be an accredited investor to do angel investing something. So what are the kind of...
If you're an individual, you need to have net worth of 10 million rupees or more, which won't include your house. But if you're in the institution, it's easier. And these are early days. So the approvals that we have is to be able to raise investments and then only deploy them in our small store portfolios. So it's like a closed loop crowd fund. It's not that I can go out and like Kickstarter start to raise money for a hot water bottle, right? I can't do that yet, but you know, I can raise money. We can raise money from the market, from business and individuals, and they invest it. And it's live right now. You could go to our website and you can choose the Kirana stores that you like, and then you can actually put money in it, and we give you up to 20% annualized return. Which is 1.67% monthly.
Can I use your platform and licenses and build, let's say, my own Kickstarter on top of that?
You can not do that on our crowdfunding licenses, but I can tell you what you can do. You can take our APIs for funds transfer, for wallet opening, for bill payments, for lending, for so many other things, right? And you can go out and offer these as your services in your apps and in your environments where we are at the back, right? And that is what you can do. But because crowdfunding is so new, you know, and it has to be handled with caution, and you know, we'll get distracted, but I can give you stories of some of the things that have happened in other countries, and given our country with so little experience with credit, I think that's the right approach. But minus my crowdfunding license, everything else is available on APIs.
About my second question, that in this high percentage cash economy, how the traction is coming along and what kind of problems that you're
That's
facing?
a great question. Look, I mean, you know, I have to explain this to you that, you know, digital credit, the promise of digital credit is a precursor for this large-scale behavior change to move away from cash and paper. You know, no business, and even a professional or individual, can not afford to not get into digital credit. Right? I mean, if you're a small business and if you don't have access to cash flow smoothing products or working capital, you would not be able to grow. And what is true for this one single unit is also true for the overall economy. So here is a statement. The fastest way to document Pakistan's economy is to be able to give access of digital credit to businesses and individuals. And the greatest promise that you make for that behavior change is that if you go out and start to create your transactions and your footprint digital, you'll have access to equitable credit. So today we can go out and do what we do because the stores, whatever they are buying upstream, is always recorded.
Yeah.
So we get data from our partners, distributors and the FMCGs on a timeline series showing us how much these stores have been buying for last many months. We, however, have no view.
You can essentially assign a credit score.
Yeah, but listen to this. We have no view today of what they're selling.
Yeah.
Because every damn thing is in cash.
Right.
But we operate in a supply chain which is called FMCG, which is fast moving consumer goods. So there's no way in hell that the guys keep buying every 15 days and he's not selling, because he won't know where to keep all of this stuff.
Yeah.
Right? So we don't really look at today what he's selling, but we look at what he's buying, and out of that we create a score. Imagine if we could see what he's selling. But today I can see what the online players are selling. Yeah. All the online commerce businesses, I know what they're buying, because you know what people are buying, right? Because there are receipts and records and invoices. But you, in the online businesses, you also know what they're selling, even if it's COD, because the courier records, all of those things, etc. So online businesses are ready for digital credit. Any business that gets ready for digital credit, any professional that gets ready for digital credit, improves their quality of life. The lure is so much that it would not allow you to live out in the cash economy. And the people that will digitize their payments, will digitize their user experiences, and will get extra credit, will grow several times more than the guy who wants to insist in staying out of the system.
By the way, the user experience of most of this, of the digital cash app or digital apps that we have is kind of, it needs to be looked upon. I mean, it's
yeah, because it's built,
very
these are
poor.
built by banks.
Yeah,
these are built by
very
banks.
poor.
Yeah, I mean, you're using very kind words. We are on camera, but these are built by banks, right? My father, you know, he's 83, but he does everything on his own, mashallah. He tried for 3 months in the pandemic world, and before that he said, this is BS, I'm going to pay my own bills, this, that,
Right.
But then he said, man, now I need to get this. 3 months he went to all the banks, tried to register. Internet banking and mobile banking failed. Not because he's 83, because all of these damn processes suck. I mean, the way they're constructed. In our experience business, onboarding process is the mother of all processes, and it's way more important than the use cases and the functionality.
Absolutely.
If you can't get into the damn door, who cares how many use cases you have? So most of these apps are built by banks, and they fail you on the first point of getting into those apps.
Right.
When you get into those apps, only then people use those use cases and feedback loops come in. But I mean, we've got so many new EMIs now coming in, like NeaPay and SadaPay and Tak and all of that, and they will show
how to really do that.
How to do that, right? Yeah.
Okay.
And the banks will then, move on the line as well.
Okay. So Qasif, tell us about your funding journey, your team building, how it all happened, and where you are these days.
Yeah. Look, I mean, the biggest, there are two things on this. The first is that, the startup business model, why it's changing the world for the last 30, 40 years is because, the startup founders get this ultimate freedom, and millions of dollars to go out and do their thing. And their boards are not seeping energy out of them, and they are actually on their side.
Yeah.
And you can create this little capsule in which you can create a utopian play. You get enough time to create a.
You can imagine your own fairy world and can
yes. Now so that's the at the heart of the reason, because the power is then vested in the founders, and the founders can then go out and do their thing without the Sate dancing on their head. right? Because if the Seth is down on your head, you can't build any value, right? ये करोगे तो मैं ये दूंगा. That's not how you can't play like that, right? That's the great thing. The bad thing about the startup play is that founders get into this illusion that they're making everything happen. And they think that it's them and they are the Pied Pipers and they know where the end line is, and when everybody gets to the end, it'll be all merry, so they can make everybody's life hell and just drive everybody to that end. That's a startup founder's fallacy, because business is a team sport.
Right.
And the only way you can create real value is by taking the control that you have and then vesting it in your management team. And your management team then collectively becomes the founder. And when you have 8 or 9 people that are working with each other, serving each other, feeling all powerful, without any politics, that's the mantra of creating value. Now, that is the same mantra which was 5,000 years ago too. 5,000 years ago, if you put 10, 15 people together, and they had character, they had loyalty, they had grit, they had a goal which was much bigger than themselves and a few other things, they would go fatah a gaon or a killa or make a boat or do great things. So in today, modern day capitalism, if you have to go out and create value from 0 to 1, it has to happen by creating that configuration of people, and the relationships that they have with each other, and the respect and the grit and the character and the goal that they have, which is bigger than themselves. It's that what unlocks value. And in Finja, we are blessed to have that because we got the time to do it, right? I mean, we've been at it for many years now.
When did you actually start it?
We started in 2016. And we were a payment company when we started. We said we'd make everything free, all payments free, and then people will do a lot of transactions and then we lend. But when we did that, people still didn't do free transactions, and then we had to give them lollipops, and the minute that happened, we couldn't score that. So the only people that were really doing transactions were the ones whose salaries we were dispersing in their wallets. So then we started to lend to professionals, and we were growing like this, and then the pandemic happened. At that point, we weren't even sure what we would do with our own people, let alone lend to other people. And a very small part of Finja at that time was lending to the Kiryana stores. But we were smart enough to realize that in the new world order, hyper-local is what's going to be king. And this virus is not going to go away. It's the greatest, I'll reserve my comments, but it's not going anywhere. There are different versions of that which would keep coming in, is what I believe. And hyper-local will always stay important, and we actually pivoted. And now a large part of what we do is lending to these businesses, but we continue to lend to professionals. But we lend to these businesses.
So which one is faster growing? The businesses?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Look, I mean, we are so clear that when we go out and partner with the Kiryana, we cannot do a nuksan of our partner. Because we don't give out cash and we only allow you to buy supplies. So when you use our credit, you win. And only when you make more money, we get a part of that. Once we've understood this, that's why we are committed to this. I mean, we think that real growth only happens when you go out and make sure that your partners are winning as a consequence of your business model.
Absolutely, it has to be a win-win for all.
It has to be, and with supply chain lending in our design, where there is no cash involved, the partner cannot lose. He can't go buy a bottle of booze or a bike or spend that money.
So they're not lending money actually.
No, money is fungible. In a market like Pakistan where people are not trained on credit, if you give them credit and they misuse it, I think, people who give them credit have to take part of that responsibility. And that's how we think. That's allowed us to steer our work to supply chain lending more and more.
So you used a word fungible, and that reminds me of the blockchain and all that. So what's your opinion on that? I mean, for Pakistan, even this all Fintech looks like a very new tech, and while the world is using it for quite some time, blockchain is even a newer kid on the block. So I was just listening to some other, and we also did something over that, But how the regulations are, I mean, अभी तो मुझे ये लगता है कि कोई आप blockchain पे करेंगे तो FIR आ जाएगा आपके दफ्तर में कि भाई what are you doing? But at the end of the day, there are many use cases for that. So how do you really see the regulations are softening up around it? Is it something like 1 year or 5 years down the road, and how it's going to support fintech? It's an alternate to fintech, or regulated fintech versus this unregulated fintech. What is all? What's your view?
Listen. Before, I think it's important, for us to sequence events as they happen in the future. So I think the next big thing that is coming is called embedded finance and open banking. I think that is going to change everything. It's going to dwarf the the internet.
So what is open banking?
Open banking is when companies like Finja and the banks go out and allow their APIs to be consumed by non-financial companies, and those non-financial companies can go out and produce and consume financial products not just for themselves but for their users as well.
Right.
And now what we are entering in Pakistan is the first generation of open banking or embedded finance. Right. Embedded finance would be, an example would be that any company that wants lending for their users can have a lending button in their app, which is their button, and when someone clicks it.
So for instance, Tkxel wants a lending for its team base. We can add one on our employee portal, and it's connected back to you.
Right. Yeah. So, and what's going to happen is that these new age companies, like Finja, not just Finja, there are many more coming, they will go out and expose these APIs and very quickly will become platforms. And some of the banks are also going to go out and do the same thing. Right? And with that, you would see open banking and financial services come in. Now, the timeline for that would be between now and the next 3 to 5 years. And the world would be a very different place. When I say world, I mean Pakistan. Now, at the heels of that is when the blockchain play will come. And blockchain is a foundational play on which then this next level of growth will happen. This next level of growth of open finance and embedded finance, open banking, etc., will not be hosted on the old world infrastructure. So in our thinking at Finja, we think that these are sequenced like this, right?
But do you really feel that in this regulated and KYC driven world, there will definitely be a space for digital currencies, blockchain-based currencies, regulated currencies or assets for that matter. There will be place for non-regulated banks or decentralized crowdfunding platforms or whatnot.
Look, no. There's this phenomenal book called The Switch, which is about 10-15 years old, which talks about that every time when a new technology comes, it has this promise of creating an open system. When the telephone came, when the radio came, when the TV came, when the cinema came, and when the internet came, we had the same shine that you have in your eyes now when you talk about blockchain. We all felt. But eventually, all of these systems are taken hostage by the incumbent players. Right? So all the money that is coming into fintech and all of these other players are money that some of the incumbents have, but they don't know what to do with it. Similarly, these digital currencies, etc., if they have to become mainstream, the anonymity in them would have to go. And we already know that the Chinese government is creating their own. We know Citibank is creating their own.
So digital currencies
are, PayPal has created a digital, when you buy, we would know who you are, and when you send it to somebody, we would know who you are, but everything else operates like a... So there will always be a Bitcoin to the likes that there is, but for large governments or for the larger world order to adopt that will not happen in my view. And the second thing is that, countries like Pakistan and even smaller countries which are emerging, if they were to quickly reboot to something like this, their economies will go up like anything, and that's why the IMFs of the world and the world order will never let that happen. You know, because you just change the rule of the game. You know, you completely change the chases on which.
You have just done a leapfrog and
the existing systems are so powerful, and that's the Achilles heel of the capitalistic system.
Right.
So few people have so much power that they would always use that power to not change the status quo. To our earlier conversation of MCB. Right? MCB won't want the banking industry to change overnight because MCB makes more money.
With inertia, and they have inertia as well as they have the establishment of that.
So I've lived a long time on this planet, so I don't think that kind of thing will happen.
Okay. We have seen quick growth in fintechs in our neighboring countries. So what are the areas you see in Pakistan and these are the last couple of questions, in Pakistan fintech space that will gain more traction in your view, as well as any kind of advice, suggestions for the bankers, because they are in the industry, they can build new use cases or new startups. What kind of fintech products or areas you see flourishing?
There's a thing called the gold rush in California, right, in the last century. And you know, when a gold rush happens, and this no less than a gold rush, I think this is a platinum rush or whatever. When that happens, so there are players that would go out and dig gold, and then there are players that would go out and produce pails and shovels. So my advice, and we've thought about it a lot, my advice to all the young guys who want to start up fintechs and startups need to understand that they are safer off if they build pails and shovels. Meaning, all incumbents in all industries are like smartphones, meaning they are platforms and they cannot save their lives to innovate. If you're a hospital, if you're a university, if you're a bank, I don't care what you are, if you are the leaders in that industry, you are an incumbent. A startup in fintech would need to come on top of that incumbent, use their assets, use their licenses, solve their problems. And when you solve that problem, you need to get a part of the cost save or part of the revenue that you generate. And now you're in. It is a super risky strategy to go out and then start a B2C play and start digging gold yourself, right? Especially as these places become regulated, as some of the places which are regulated. So my advice is that think hard that what are these big problems that these incumbents need solving, and then go out and solve them. And you know, on these incumbents, people who are at the top get it. I mean, this is not rocket science anymore. We know the playbook is written many times.
Do they get it or do they like it?
No, they get it. They get it. It's the problem is that the organizations under them are so dense and their structures are
so much inertia,
you know, and then they are so focused on making quarter to quarter increments that this is slightly future for them, right? So it becomes a slightly harder sell. No problem, go to the smaller incumbents. Like, I mean, if you want to partner with a bank, don't partner with a large bank. Go partner with the smallest bank, because that smallest bank through your partnership could become the largest bank. That's how the rules of the game have changed. In the smaller bank, people know their head from their foot. In the large bank, everything is all over the place, right? Similarly, go to a small hospital, go to a small university, right? So, so I see a lot of action happening. Look, the last 15 years in this world have been in partnerships of large platforms and small companies. That's how value has been unlocked over the last 15, 20 years. In China, it's happened repeatedly. So in China, you have like 10, 15 platforms which have 800, 900 million users across industries. Every few weeks, they go and invest into a small little tiddly company and then bring them on top. And suddenly that tiddly company has 250 million users, because all of them have, like out of the 900 million people, 250 million people have bought like a $2 insurance. And suddenly this company is hundreds of millions of dollars. So the last 15, 20 years is about the platforms taking partnerships with smaller companies. Now, we have arrived in an age where two things will happen. One thing will happen that so in Pakistan, things are happening a little later. So the same thing will happen here, but there is a bigger revolution in the making, which is two small companies will come together. And that is going to create the next level of disruption. You know why? Because when two small companies come together, three things happen. First, they only come together if their skill sets are diverse.
Right.
Second, they can truly commit to each other's win-win. And third, they control their own damn destiny.
Right.
So these three things are going to create partnerships between two small companies, like our companies, right?
Yeah.
And you know, that's a speedboat partnership. But in Pakistan hasn't seen the age where the incumbents have partnered with smaller companies, and the fintechs and the startups and the young guys.
They're too arrogant to do that and too slow to do that as well.
The ones that will not do that are going to become the blackberries of their industry.
Absolutely.
And it's all going to happen, you know, fairly quickly.
Okay. So Finja's next 2-3 years goals, where you're
Look, I mean, we want to become the de facto leaders in supply chain lending. And right now we are mostly focused on the FMCG supply chain lending. But you know, the truth is that all supply chains work the same way.
Right.
You know, whether it's fashion, it's health, it's medical, it's agriculture. It's just that, you know, the risks are slightly different, and the life cycles of how supplies are bought, manufactured and sold are different. So we want to transcend supply chains, but our initial goal is to, you know, today we are in 35 cities and we do, you know, thousands of these stores. We want to be in hundreds of cities and we want to do hundreds and thousands of stores. That's our first goal. And then the second goal would be that we would want to be in multiple supply chains. Our mission is that we want to be the flag bearers, or the alam bardar, like I like to call, of the digital credit play in Pakistan. We want to inspire hundreds of companies like us to go out and create digital lending the equitable way for businesses in this country. And we want to be known as the company, you know, that started this revolution in Pakistan.
So all the very best for your future goals. And this was Qasif with us from Finja. I hope you will enjoy all this conversation. At least I've gained a lot of it. Thank you very much for being with us.